Hi, welcome to Strategy, Leadership, and Impact with your host, Blake Repine. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Strategy, Leadership, and Impact. A couple of things I want to update you on. Everybody knows last year I did my first audiobook of my second book, The Leadership Path, and that's been going really well. I've really been surprised at how well it's been selling and the number of people that have been either checking it out at their local library on digital format or buying a copy of the audiobook. And it actually never made it onto Audible, which I find surprising. We're still working on that, trying to figure out why it never got onto Audible, but hopefully we can get that solved and get out onto Audible fairly soon. But in the interim, I'm going back now and starting the audiobook of my first book, Soldier to Executive. And I hope to have that released in the next 3 to 6 months or so, depending on schedules. So very excited about that. The other thing I'm working on is my third book, which is not titled at the moment. I'm about halfway through my first draft of it. That is a book that's going to focus on the emotions of a leader and how we control our emotions, understand our emotions, how we use our emotions in leadership, and how it affects the things that we do sometimes without us even knowing. So like I said, halfway through my first draft of that book. I hope to have the first full draft done and completed in the next few months or so, and then take the next few months to go through all the various editing processes, cover design, the whole process to get a well-polished book to market. And hopefully that one will be published toward the end of this year or early next year. So it all depends again on schedules, how fast I actually do my bit to get that first draft done, and then how fast I turn around the editing suggestions whenever they come back to me with the various things. But typically once it goes into that final editing portion, once the first draft is done, it's about a 3 to 6 month process if you want a great book. And you can tell a difference in a book that's gone through various editing processes and ones that haven't, in that final product and how it reads and how it sounds. So very much worth it to go through that process and take the extra time to get that well-polished product at the end that people will enjoy. Again, love the feedback I've gotten on the other two books and the feedback I've been getting on the podcast. Thank you very much. Keep sending them in. Keep sending the questions you ask me about topics you want me to discuss, which brings me to this week's topic, where I'm talking about leadership and technical expertise and balancing between the two. I get asked questions a lot about, what about technical expertise? As a leader, do I still need to develop them? And yes, you do, but probably not to the extent you did before. Because early on in our career, of course, we rely very heavily on technical expertise to do certain roles. And as we move up in the organization, we typically tend to learn a little bit more about other subjects or other technical things around us that we might need to know for our role. But as we grow in the organization or any organization, we move up, we start to rely more on our interpersonal skills, our ability to lead people, our ability to build relationships, our ability to motivate people or put teams together and lead teams, more than we do actually rely on our technical skills. Even though we still do need to maintain our technical skills to a certain level, it's just a different way in which we maintain them. And depending on the size of your organization and things that your organization do, will depend on how much time you actually spend doing technical things versus strategic things and thinking things. Again, you're paid to make decisions whenever you're in the top of the organization. You're not necessarily paid to do work, if that makes sense. It may not make sense to you. If it doesn't, maybe we'll have another episode and we'll discuss that in depth. Balancing leadership and technical expertise is crucial for effective management, especially in roles where both strategic vision and deep subject matter knowledge are essential. So deep subject matter knowledge, so that could potentially be the knowledge of the industry that you work in or knowledge of the organization. And leadership is considered a soft skill. It doesn't mean that it's not a skill that you shouldn't have or a skill that you should wait to develop. You can develop leadership at any point in your career, and you should be developing it throughout your entire career. The reason why it's called a soft skill is because it's not measurable. It's very difficult to quantify what leadership does to an organization. Now, there's byproducts of that, so of your leadership that will come through that can be quantified. For example, sales. If your sales go up or they go down, that could potentially be because of leadership or decisions you've made in your leadership role. Revenue or expenses on the P&L of the organization. That's a byproduct of things that the organization is doing. So if you're increasing your revenue, what are you doing to increase your revenue of the organization? That comes from your vision that you're giving the organization. You're increasing the expenses or decreasing your expenses. Again, that comes from decisions you're making within the organization of where to reinvest capital, where to spend things, or where not to spend things. So different leadership decisions that you make will have impacts or byproducts within the organization or on the organization that are quantifiable. Again, leadership is difficult to quantify, but it can be qualified. So let's talk about this. So how to strike a balance between leadership and your technical expertise. And I have 7 tips to hopefully help you guide you in doing this. These aren't the be-all end-alls, so I urge you, if you don't get a tidbit out of here that helps you, go do some more research on your own. So let's start with number 1, define your role's priorities. What's the leadership focus within your role? As a leader, your primary responsibility is guiding the team. You set the strategic direction, and you foster a positive culture, and you ensure that your leadership duties are prioritized by doing these things. And then your technical involvement. So you need to stay engaged in technical areas where your expertise adds the most value, but avoid micromanaging. If your technical expertise doesn't add any value to the team that's doing that technical job, get out of their way. You're in their way probably. You're the problem. You're the roadblock. So a tip here is delegate technical tasks to trusted experts, people that you trust to do the job or that you know are experts in that area, and focus on decision making. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, whenever you're sitting in the top role or toward the top of the organization, you're paid for the decisions you make, not the work you do. Very different mindset there. Your big thing is going to be around problem solving and putting out fires. I spend a lot of my time actually doing this, putting out fires and empowering the team. So as a leader, that's one of your big jobs, empower the team. Number 2, maintain technical competence. So you need to stay updated on industry trends, whatever industry you work in, advancements within that industry, but also look at overall standards as a whole. It could be changes in legislation, or the big one that's coming up for a lot of organizations, the new financial reporting standards around ESGs, that's Scope 1 and Scope 2. So you need to stay ahead or stay updated on all these advancements and technical developments without trying to master every detail. So you need to be abreast of what's happening. Where's the organization going? Where's the industry going? And what's happening that's going to impact the industry potentially in the long term, whether it be technological advances, whether it be political things happening around the world. You really need to understand the context in which your organization operates and how all these factors around it will affect the organization, and be prepared to make changes or make decisions in order to address those changes. And leverage learning opportunities. Go to your industry events. Go do a new certification. Discuss subject with subject matter experts. Go seek out someone who's really good in that area that you want to know more about, or that you feel like you need to know more about, and learn from them, have discussions with them. But also this helps you to maintain your credibility with the technical teams too, because while you're not doing the technical job, and you don't necessarily need to know exactly how to do everything within their job, you need to know kind of what the requirements of their job and how that job affects the organization, or what they do for the organization. And a tip here would be show curiosity about technical work to demonstrate your commitment without overshadowing your leadership focus. So go around, and this is also having those conversations with your team, and they can see that you care about what they do and that what they do matters no matter what their job is in the organization. Go talk to them. If you don't know what they do, ask them. Or if you know what their job is, so well, how do you do this job? What do you like most about it? And you can also find out too where some of their pain points within that role, and you can help solve problems for them and remove roadblocks by having those conversations. But just by showing that curiosity, you're going to learn more about what they do, things that may have changed recently within their role, and you're going to help build relationships as well. Number 3, leverage your team's strength. Build a team with complementary skills, allowing you to focus on leadership while relying on their technical expertise. Encourage cross-functional collaboration to foster innovation and build trust. So one of the reasons why you would do that is to keep your organization from becoming siloed, and everybody works within their little silo, within their own little realm, and they don't really collaborate across the organization. And then this organization starts to develop as one that nobody knows what anybody's doing, and they've kind of lost their way. So a tip here would be to acknowledge team contributions and recognize when their technical knowledge surpasses your own. This builds credibility and respect. I am not afraid at all when I'm sitting in a meeting to defer to someone who is a subject matter expert. I do that all the time. People have asked me before, why is this person in the meeting? Well, they're in the meeting because I'm going to go to them for their recommendation or for them to educate me or to tell me what they think about this decision I should make. They're going to give me the background. They're going to give me the context because they are the subject matter expert in that area. I'm not. Sitting at the head of the organization, you cannot be the subject matter expert in everything that goes on within that organization, particularly if it's a medium or even a large organization. And it would do your head in. And if you are trying to do that, trying to master everything within the organization, you're probably focusing on the wrong things. So big tip there. And I tell you, it goes a long way to developing yourself to do this. Number 4, communicate effectively. So you need to be able to translate technical concepts into strategic goals for stakeholders. So very important there. And then align technical details with organizational objectives to bridge the gap between vision and execution. Depending on the structure of your organization, you potentially have a board or some sort of governing body that you work with, or even if you're not at the top of the organization, someone that you report to. So potentially they will be responsible for setting the strategy. And then you'll have people within the organization that will help you develop the operational plan, which supports the strategy. So you really have to be able to bridge that gap in between operational and strategic and be able to communicate that effectively back with the team and then gather that feedback to make sure everybody's understanding and everybody's doing things operationally that support the accomplishment of the strategic objectives of the organization. And a tip here would be practice active listening to understand both technical and non-technical perspectives fully. But like I said, going back just a second ago, you're listening for feedback. Do people understand where we're going? Do people understand how their role supports the achievement of the strategic goals that the organization set? And if it doesn't, then you need to make decisions to change it. Number 5, avoid technical management. Resist the urge to dive too deep into technical tasks as it can undermine team autonomy and stifle innovation. Also, if you're diving down into technical tasks, you're potentially stepping on the toes of one of your manager. And now, if you're actually having to step in to manage that manager's team, there's something wrong there and it's potentially a performance issue that you need to address. But if you're stepping down into that technical area because it is a comfort area for you, because you're highly skilled in that area, you're probably getting in that manager's way and they're going to be very upset about it. It could potentially build some animosity there and they could end up leaving. So recognize when you do that. You're not required to still do the same things you were required to do in a previous role at a certain level if you're in the top of the organization. So get out of that manager's way, let them run their team. You need to trust your team to execute while providing guidance and support when needing. So this is where I think people sometimes they really struggle, potentially when they're new to leadership roles, is stepping back and trusting that team to execute. Just know that even though you don't see it happening or hear of it happening, it's happening. That people are actually doing what they're supposed to do. You have to have that trust. You can't sit back and worry if people are or aren't doing what they're supposed to do. If they're not, it'll come through, and you have managers potentially to address that. But if it's your role to address whatever is or isn't happening, then you need to do it. And a tip here would be to focus on outcomes rather than methods, allowing the team to find solutions independently. That's a good tip because people aren't going to do things the way that you would want to do them. People are going to have their own methods. Management is going to have their own methods that they like to do, as long as they're not toxic and they're getting the job done. As long as they're not doing something illegally to get the job done or immoral, then that's okay. There's 100 different ways to do lots of different tasks, and let them manage it the best way they know how. And this is where you can step back and mentor if you see where things need to be changed or someone needs a bit more support. Overall, don't get upset because they're not doing it the way you want them to do it. As long as the outcome is what you need it to be, that's what matters. Number 6, develop emotional intelligence. And we've been talking about this a lot lately. Build rapport with technical and non-technical team members by understanding their challenges and goals, and use empathy and adaptability to bridge gaps between diverse teams. Like I mentioned before, around the communications, going around meeting your team, talking to them about what they're doing, you're going to hear about things that potentially are aggravations for them, pain points within their jobs and stuff that they would like to have fixed. And this is where you need to empathize with them and actually work with them to come up with solutions to their challenges that they're having and their goals. One of the biggest things that you can do as a leader is to help people achieve success. So understanding their goals and helping them achieve success in their role will make your organization so successful, and you will achieve things far beyond what you could ever imagine if you just sit back and do that and help people achieve what it is they want to achieve. And a tip here would be regularly seek feedback on how you balance leadership and technical involvement to refine your approach. This is where you can potentially sit back and talk to your managers and ask them, am I supporting you enough, too much, too little? Find that sweet spot around support for them and what they need. And that could change from day to day, week to week, project to project, depending on what's happening. And then number 7, focus on long-term impact. Shift your perspective from how tasks are done to why they matter for the organization, and develop systems and structures that ensure technical excellence while driving organizational growth. If you're looking for the quick wins, you'll find those. But what you need to look for is the long-term sustainability of the organization, so that long-term growth, building the foundation that the organization will be able to stand on for however long to come in order to survive and remain relevant and remain impactful within whatever industry you're working in. So by focusing on the long-term impact of what you're doing now will actually help set you up for success in the future. So always keep that future focus on all your decisions and think about what are the impacts of the decisions I'm making, what are the long-term effects that this is going to have, because we want to retain staff for the long term. We want the organization to be around for the long term because it's all about sustainability. And if we're building a really strong culture, then that's going to just happen naturally. Balancing leadership and technical expertise is an ongoing process. This is something that you're going to do day to day, sometimes hour to hour, depending on what you're doing. And by fostering collaboration and staying informed and focusing on the bigger picture, you can effectively lead while ensuring technical excellence within your organization. And a lot of that comes back to building the best team that you can, getting the best skilled people you can. And if they're not the best skilled people, finding opportunities for them to be upskilled. So reinvesting some of your profits back into your team to help them be better, to make them better at their job. The old saying around, the CFO says, what if we spend all this money on people and they end up leaving? And the CEO says, what if we don't spend it and they stay? So that old conundrum. So put money into your people, reinvest in them or invest in them. I'm not saying reinvest in them. Keep investing in them every year to help them get better. And they probably will stay a little bit longer because they feel like they're valued and that you're investing in them to make them more valuable. So keep doing that. And focusing on the bigger picture, sometimes you're going to get bogged down in the day-to-day stuff. You're going to get bogged down in the operations. But set aside some time in your schedule, whether weekly, monthly, whatever, to just think. I sometimes still do. I'll block out certain blocks in my calendar. And sometimes it's not to do work or to get caught up on anything, no emails. It's just to think or to read something that's from an article I saw about something that's happening within my industry that I want to read to educate myself. But the thinking bit is something that you need to be doing, I would say on a weekly basis. I would recommend you do on a weekly basis. Set aside at least an hour to 2 hours a week just to think about what the organization is doing at a very high level. Don't think about the issues. Don't think about the problems. Think about where you want to go with the organization or where the organization is headed in the long term and how do you get there? And is your team the right team? What do you need to empower them to get there? Things like that. And I'll guarantee once you start creating that time to sit and think long term and to think strategically, over a period of, I'd say 6 to 12 months, you're going to see a change in the organization and what they're achieving because you're actually able to enable yourself to be a better leader by giving yourself that time. So what do you think about this? Let me know. I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. I really appreciate everyone that has been sending me emails, sending me messages on LinkedIn and other means to give me feedback, to ask questions, to really broaden my perspective, to broaden my mind, because every time I do some studying and put some of this together to put forward the podcast, I'm learning as well, and I appreciate that. And I am so glad that you choose to come along this learning journey with me, because at the end of the day, we're all going to be better leaders for it. Anyway, I hope you have a good one, and I'll talk to you again soon.